Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks. We've got another look at our Shalai and Hallar deck. The user of the original Shalai and Hallar deck sent me a new list using the form that you can find in the video description below. And if you want me to look at your decks, use that same form, and I'll take a look when I can and make a nice little video for you. So, once again, I got a little bit of a description of what we want. We want a general synergy check, we want a mana ramp and lands check, and we want suggestions for other cards. We have a budget of no cards over $1.50 Canadian, which is good because that's the currency I use, and we have no infinite combos. Now, there's going to be a lot of cards that I assume are going to be very similar to the previous deck that we've seen. And I would say, and if you're watching this video, by the way, I should note, if you want to take a look, don't forget I put the deck list in the description so that you too can come and take a look at each individual card. I'm at a level that I can see all these cards at a glance, but if you need to stop and look at your own speed, I completely understand that. I think our creature base is very strong here. We have a litany of very, very strong +1/+1 counter creatures. So we're going to come to this last because I think this is a solid start. And then let's look at our sorceries, which are all ramp cards. We've got 3 of 4 artifacts are ramp cards, with Stronic Resonator being the odd one out. And removal and other +1/+1 counter synergies and instants. And then we have 38 lands. So we also have the sideboard, which I'm going to assume are cards that are on hand to put in here. So we're going to start by talking about ramp, and we're going to start by talking about land numbers. So the first thing I want to think about is what is our curve, what are we trying to hit, and how quickly. So we've got a 2-mana commander, sorry, a 4-mana commander. So 2-mana rocks are really important here because this enables us to drop Shalai on turn 3. Is the idea. Now, this isn't another, this is a very specific kind of commander where we need Shalai and another card for Shalai to do anything. Unfortunately, right now, if you just cast Shalai on turn 3 and one of your opponents has a lightning bolt, they don't really, Shalai and Hallar don't really do anything. We need to play Shalai and we need to immediately put a +1/+1 counter to get any benefit at all. So I'm going to suggest we don't really need to rush into a strategy to always cast Shalai right away. And instead, we should think about Shalai in unison with cards like Luminarch Aspirant or Good Fortune Unicorn and Grumgully, both of which, when Shalai comes in, will at least put a +1/+1 counter. At least to get some damage in. And I would feel a lot more confident if we could pull Shalai and Hallar just a little higher in toughness so that common removal or attacks won't destroy them. So that in mind, let's see what our ramp is. We have a low amount of ramp and we have what I would consider a higher amount of lands. So if we're looking to fix this up, most likely what we're going to want to do, we're going to find our colors. We're going to look for search land battlefield. We're most likely going to find sorceries for 2 mana. And we're going to see what pops up. And I have a few in mind already. Farseek, it's about $1. So with Canadian, because these are US dollars, this might be a little higher. I'm surprised Farseek has gotten so expensive. So fortunately, that cuts us out. How's Rampant Growth? Rampant Growth is nice and cheap. It's already in there. I'm just not used to the art. Into the north. Okay, our options aren't great. Unfortunately, we're not going to play Cleansing Wildfire. And then when we go into 3 mana, we'll have more options. So if we want 2 mana, what we actually need is our mana rocks. So what that means is we're going to look for our signet or talismans, which I will have to correct in a second. Signet or talisman. Oop. So these are the closest things that we can have at our ramp level. So we've got Arcane Signet, Boros Signet, Gruul Signet, and Selesnya Signet down here are our signets that we can play. And then after which, we've got Talisman of Conviction, and now the Talisman of Unity is cheap. That's nice. Most of the enemy talismans are very cheap because they were printed in Modern Horizons, but the ally ones tend to be a little more expensive. So unfortunately, Talisman of Impulse is outside the budget. But these cards are 2 mana to play. The signets especially are very, very good as they will turn one color into two others, and therefore it helps you to be able to fix into your commander. So I would consider those. And then, yeah, a combination of those. And then the next thing I want to do, I want to look at our 1 mana green add mana creatures. Now, these are our Llanowar elves or birds of paradise, these kind of options. And generally, when we look at ramp in a deck, we kind of divide them into 3 sections. We have our 1 mana ramp, which is the strongest in the sense that it comes out the fastest and the cheapest for the least amount of mana, but is also the most vulnerable because they're creatures, so therefore most of the time they're vulnerable to board clears, targeted removal, things like that. At 2 mana, we get 1 land in play or signets, and at 3 mana, you usually get a land and something else. For example, as you saw, Kodama's Reach gives you an additional land in hand and 1 on the battlefield. But the reason specifically I'm saying to think about these creatures is that we can put +1/+1 counters on these creatures. So they become viable targets. Now, is Gilded Goose not in here actually? It seems to be from the right set. Maybe it's from another one of the commander decks, but Gilded Goose, if it's 50 cents, I would recommend picking up Gilded Goose. It is a flyer. It taps for mana once, and can produce more food tokens to tap again. Having an early flyer is very, very strong here. In addition, let's see. Birds of Paradise, what are you at these days? Unfortunately, a little higher. Add mana. So, types include creature. Add 1 green. Is there something that I'm missing? Oh, because it doesn't say green mana, it just says green. Okay, let's look at our green options. That still doesn't make sense. Oh well, I know the majority of them off by. So, Land o' War. Land o' War Elf is our classic. Land of War Elves gives us 1 green. Tap, add. Oh, because it has the mana symbol. Okay, yep, just 1 more second on that. Creature, 1 mana, and then our symbol is like that. Okay, so let's put a G. Let's see what we can get. So, already, Elvish Mystic is 1. You can pick it up at about 40 cents. So once again, that's within a Canadian dollar budget. Findhorn Elves, also around the same price. I wouldn't play all of these. I play all of them in a deck that I am expecting to be very strong, where I need really quick ramp. But that's not the case here, right? So I would definitely I would play maybe 2 or 3. There's a few that tap for other colors. There's Avacyn's Pilgrim is the last one I'll show you. Avacyn's Pilgrim. So what I like about these is that you can cut out one or two lands for them because 38 plus a little bit of ramp is a lot of lands, and these can be a form of ramp that will also grow with your creatures. So that would be a big choice on my end for your lands. Right now, a lot of your lands come in tapped, so so I'm going to suggest having a few one mana creatures that you can drop. Because let's say you're playing a tap land every turn. It's not ideal, but it could happen, right? So if you play a tap land every turn, I'm just going to look up pain lands while we do that. If you play a tap land every turn, your first land will be able to, on your next turn, play Avacyn's Pilgrim, which then you play a tap land, and on turn 3, you will have 3 mana even though you're putting tap lands every turn. So that's harder to do if you have a signet that goes turn 1 tap land, turn 2 tap land, do nothing, turn 3 tap land, play the signet, and you can't even activate the signet because you don't have any more mana. So I would try these 1 mana creatures first. And we're going to look up brushlands, brushland. For our pain lands are a little more expensive, even though they just got printed, unfortunately. I was hoping these would be cheaper so you can pick up a few, but they must be seeing play in standard. If these drop, these are called the pain lands, where they tap for colorless and one of either color for 1 damage to you. If you can grab, there should be 3 in your colors. If you can grab these when they drop in price again, I would recommend it because they are cheap lands that come in untapped for your deck. All right, then very quickly, let's see how our timing is going. Excellent. I want to talk about proliferate because this is something I feel like you could use a little bit of. I saw that you had a few cards with proliferate, and I'm looking for maybe 1 or 2 more. Specifically, I was thinking of Grateful Apparition. Grateful Apparition is a flyer that proliferates on hit, and I want you to reimagine this creature as when this creature hits, put a +1/+1 counter on all creatures with a +1/+1 counter. And then look at your list briefly and think to yourself, how many creatures come in or easily add a +1/+1 counter? And with that in mind, this is a particularly strong card. It works well with your commander. It works well by itself. If you can put 1 counter on it every time it attacks, it grows. That's really nice. Um, you want something like Huatley's Raptor that proliferates on combat, or Pollen Bright Druid that proliferates. Sorry, I said combat on ETB. Both of these are on ETB. You don't want that as much. If they're only going to proliferate once, you could do better. You want something that can proliferate several times if possible. That's unfortunately $3. Courage in Crisis. I like Courage in Crisis, even though it proliferates once, because it also puts the counter in. Like I said, it doesn't just do something. So in worst case scenario, this is put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. But oftentimes, it's not that bad across the board. Evolution Sage is unfortunately just out of your budget. And so I'm looking for anything else at low mana cost that proliferates repeatedly. 70 cents. I don't think you play. I don't know if you play enough artifacts to do this. This was a very interesting card in the artifact deck that came out because when it enters the battlefield, it puts a +1/+1 counter on all your creatures. But in order to proliferate, it needs a lot more artifacts for you to sacrifice, and you really don't have enough. So unless you change the deck quite a bit, I wouldn't recommend that. I think I'm going to end that there. Instead, let's move on from proliferate, and I'm going to suggest the next thing. There's one card that I've been thinking specifically. It is a Hydra and counter other creature. So this is Wildwood Scourge. So I notice you don't want infinite combos. This is not an infinite combo, but it is really repeatable. Wildwood Scourge says comes in with X plus one counters, and then whenever a counter goes on a non-Hydra creature, put one on this one as well. And this is very similar to the card you have here, Botanical Brawler from the new set, except for this, our Hydra doesn't have trample, unfortunately. It doesn't cost, it's in two colors, and you can scale it, which is nice, but it doesn't have the once per turn clause. So every time you put a counter on any other one of your creatures that isn't a Hydra, which is the majority, Wildwood Scourge will grow. I find that to be very, very strong. It is rough that it doesn't have evasion, but you have means of giving it evasion with your, where are you? Abzan Falconer, for example. It is going to grow exceedingly fast. It is a very satisfying card to play. You you have this down even as a 2-drop and a few turns of just naturally playing out your creatures. Wildwood Scourge is going to be easily a 5/5/6/6 and growing. If you imagine it with an ability that just puts a +1/+1 across the board, I'm thinking like Mael's Aria, or even that artifact creature I just showed, you can imagine how quickly that's going to grow. Now, the other one I don't see here. Maybe it's in the side. No, it's not. We'll have to see what the price is. I don't remember what it was called. Counter. It is Avatar of the Resolute, which is cheap. So it's a reach trample, and it comes in with a +1/+1 counter for each other creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Now, this is kind of rough because it is dependent on the board. You need a few creatures out already for this to be really good, but it is honestly the stats of reach and trample here, and the fact that you can, after the fact, even if you just run this out on turn 2, you can put counters on it after. This has the ability to be a very good creature in your deck. So I would consider that as an additional creature to put in, because one of the things is that getting in is hard. You will make a big team, but evasion is really important here, because if you're playing against a token opponent, you will be able to be blocked every attack at low cost to them. And a lot of your evasion comes from specific cards, Champion of the Lambholt, Abzan Falconer, both of these, for example, which are lightning rods for removal for obvious reasons. If your opponents can pick them off, they will, which then all of a sudden your big boys and girls and everyone like Dust League and Duelist like is just a vigilance. Yeah, it draws you cards, but when they become like an 8/8, that's it. You're just attacking and you're hoping they're not chumping. So having a few creatures that just naturally have reach and trample are very good. Now, I know I just suggested a Hydra that doesn't have those abilities, but I think it's made up for the fact that it has a very high ceiling of power. Very, very briefly, I'm going to go into something that I think you should play a few more of, and I think that is fight cards. Fight is, of course, green's mechanic for dealing with its problems. It doesn't have removal in the strictest sense, but you need to destroy creatures. So let's go by mana value and let's take a look at a few of our options for fighting. Now, I would suggest we're looking for something that can put, like Dramoka's command that you already have. We're looking for a few other cards. I believe you also have Inscription of Abundance. Perfect. That do this effect. Just one or two. It'd be nice if they give a +1/+1 counter in addition. I wonder how much Domri is. Just out of budget, unfortunately. But I think either you want to play things like Mutant's Prey, where yeah, it requires the +1/+1 counter, um, but it's instant speed, or just the classic Prey Upon, which has no such clause. It's just your creature fights another creature. Playing one or two of these effects would be very, very good. Choose a target creature you control and creature you don't control. And then if you have Coven, then they fight. I think this as well would be fine. Coven is easy in your deck because everything is growing and everything new comes in particularly weak. You should be able to get Coven for Duel of Dominance, and then you can fight two creatures together, and keep attacking. Uh, I think like Sword of Plowshare is good. Generous Gift is good. If you wanted a third version of that effect, of course, Beast Within is the original. Yeah, Cute to Brute, 80 cents. That one might be. I think that's from. I wonder if that's from Secret Lair, so that might be hard to get. But if you can get this card under budget at that price, it's just another copy of Generous Gift, which is a fantastic card. Okay, finishing off, I think looking at your sideboard, I wanted to say a few things. I think if you are playing Kodama's Reach, you should be playing Cultivate. If you want to play one, you should want to play the other. They're the same card. If you are playing Pride Malkin, what a cute cat. I think you can also play Pride Malkin in the same way you're playing Abzan Falconer. Trample is just as good as flying when your power is so high. And then Mindless Automaton, you should definitely be playing this. It will get ridiculously large really quickly, and it will fill up your hand very consistently. Coming back here, quick cuts really quickly. I don't think you have a lot of. You've only a few cards that care about basics. So if you're making cuts for lands, you can cut a few basics, not too many. You still want some, and then after which Mossfire Valley, or if there's another one, I think there's also Sungrass Prairie. Yeah, these are not great lands because if you draw them as your first land, they don't do anything, and if you draw them together as your first two lands, you're having a bad time. So don't play those if you can help it. And then once again, as mentioned before, I don't really like Sunscorch Regent. I think you have much better options. Um, I think you shouldn't go too far on this. Kaloni Hydra is very strong. And Conclave Sledge Captain still seems a lot of mana for me. 6 is a lot of mana in this deck. Uh, I would just rather everything else at 6 mana either gets smaller, such as Hamza, or Aki Battle Squad and Mirror Style Master just win games. So I would be a lot happier with those being the highest cards in your deck, with Conclave Sledge Captain being replaced. And the last thing I'll say is Mael's Aria sometimes can be a trap. Play with it long enough until you decide if you like it or not, and try to keep track of when you play it and you don't have a creature with power 5 or greater. Because if you don't, you're not going to get the first ability. When you do, it is a very, very strong card. So keep an eye on that to see how often you're getting that trigger. Otherwise, I think this is a solid deck. I think depending after this, if you on the budget you can build, there's going to be a lot of really nice directions to go into, and I would think mostly in your lands. But if you focus on getting a few more signets and talismans, if you focus on getting 1 to 2 1 mana creatures, think about the few extra cards that I said to even it out, and think about a few fight cards. I think it'll even out the deck a lot more, so you don't feel like you're in a situation where your mana's wrong, or that you have a really strong board, but you're being stonewalled by one effect, such as an opponent with Elish Norn or an opponent with a very big, dangerous creature with lifelinks, for example, where attacking them just becomes not profitable because you're going to lose creatures, having the ability to fight it is probably the best way to do it and to take it out. They'll still get the life gain, but after which you can attack with impunity. Okay, I hope this helped. If you build another draft of this, I would love to see it. Especially, I know it's tough. Budget techs have limitations, but if you try this with a different budget, there'll probably be a lot more options we can go into. And always, if you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate a comment or a like or a subscribe. You know the YouTube thing. And hopefully I'll see you again soon.